Hello, art parents. So we are to March, which is one of the projects I'm most excited to do with the kids. We'll be painting on these canvas boards. They're great for framing because they're nice and thin, but they're a little bit more special. It's kind of fun to give the kids a chance to paint on something with a little more tooth with that canvas feel. Hopefully it'll be something special for them that they'll take home and keep and enjoy. And then also we're studying a great artist, Paul Cezanne. He was not only a painter who produced amazing paintings that people still love today, but a really pivotal character in art history. Um, so let's talk about him for just a minute. He was at the end of the Post-Impressionist period, kind of the end of the Impressionists. And because of that, really kind of in this great changing time from the end of the 19th century to the early part of the 20th century. He is the one who kind of transitioned, or well, one of the few who transitioned painters in from that impressionistic phase to more modern forms of art like Cubism, or modern forms of painting, I should say. So just to give the kids an example, I had two pictures or two prints from the library for you to see, and I've just labeled Impressionism so that there isn't any confusion. But I would just take a minute and talk to the kids about these paintings. You know, what do you notice? They are very realistic. However, Impressionism was really a great movement because you can see the lines are really loose and free-flowing. Impressionists were more concerned about capturing light and exploring color and getting a moment rather than sitting down and doing, you know, a painstaking, beautiful piece of work like Botticelli in the Renaissance. Excuse me. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of the art between the Renaissance up through Impressionism, while it definitely had differences, still maintained that kind of similar feel, very realistic, very controlled, careful brush strokes. So it's kind of, you know, this is an exciting time. We're entering into the Industrial Revolution, and life is just changing, and that's so fun, and that is, of course, reflected in the art. So Matisse and Picasso, both amazing artists, called Cezanne the father of us all because he really was kind of that transition. He led us into looking at things from a more rounded perspective, and instead of just setting up a beautiful composition and creating a two-dimensional picture, trying to really get to the structural side of things, trying to portray that in a more three-dimensional way, the way your eye would see it in real life. So a little history about Cezanne. He was born on January 19th, 1839 in Aix-en-Provence, in southern France. His father, Louis-Auguste Cezanne, was a prosperous banker. He wanted Cezanne to kind of follow in that same, those same footsteps. Be in business, be a, happy upper middle class man. And of course, Paul didn't agree. He wanted to be an artist, and because of that drive and because of support from some, great friends who were artists, he moved out when he was 22 and went to Paris to pursue his art career. Initially, his father didn't approve and kind of cut ties, but they were later able to reconcile, which is great. And because of that support from his family and the financial support, Cezanne was able to have a much more comfortable life than many of the artists from this time period did. So that's, fantastic. So he wanted to simplify nature. He wanted to simplify things down to the basic shapes that made them. And you can really see this in his paintings, especially his later paintings. He said he wanted to treat nature by the cylinder, the sphere, and the cone, which I think is a great quote. So here is one of his earlier paintings. You can kind of see that more like structural, trying to portray the 3D image. This, you can see the heavy impressionist influence in his brushstrokes here. You can see how that has that same quality, that same heavy individual brushstrokes. Cezanne was not well supported or well liked by the critics. He applied to the Salon, the Paris Salon, from 1864 to 1869 and was rejected every year, which I think is great to point out to the kids. So the Salon was the main. It really was the place to exhibit in France. They controlled pretty much everything. So really, he was rejected by the critics. However, there were a lot of artists that went to see his work, went to work in his workshop, and really admired and respected him. And then, of course, later in his career, he also received critical acclaim and was later shown in the Salon. But I think it's great for kids to see that you don't always succeed on the first try. I think that's really great to emphasize to them, that it's okay if not everybody likes your art or not everybody gets it. That's all right. That doesn't make you any less of a great artist. So I'm just briefly showing while I kind of talk to you so you can get an idea of the pictures. But take a minute, and we do have a lot of prints from the library, which is fantastic. You can put them up, go ahead and stack them up on the board for the kids to look at while they're painting. But you may not want to take the time to go through each print. But you can see kind of, look at the elementary shapes, the way the apples are, actually these are probably peaches, are treated. You can see that it's really broken down to the shapes, and yet you get a really heavy sense of like the shading and the highlight. It gives you, a firm, almost sculptural feel to the painting. Cezanne was proficient. He sold still lifes, which he's best known for, but also portraits, landscapes, and studies of bathers, which were popular at the time. Which is great. He was an artist that diversified, which is fantastic. He really, so I know I kind of feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but he really did leave behind the classical aspects. Think of Botticelli's very carefully composed works that are two-dimensional. If you think back, I should have pulled one of those out so we could get a better feel for that. But he left that behind to try and get more of a lived perspective, is what he called it. By capturing all the complexities and yet breaking it down into the simpler forms, which is phenomenal. I just think that's such a great, juxtaposition is what the art term is. A great, mix of two different sides. He did focus on the details, and he's famous for taking a lot of time on his paintings, for taking hours thinking about it and deciding what he'd do before he actually painted the brush stroke. And sorry about the glare. I'm recording this late at night because sometimes you just got to get it done when you can. So sorry, but you get the idea. Okay, so we would go through these with the students, kind of take a moment. This is this is an excellent example of his still lifes that were popular and are popular to this day. Take a moment to just look at the composition, look at the interesting way the apples are piled, but also how you see the distinct rounded shapes. They're a little bit simplified. It's not completely realistic. You see the heavy impressionist brush strokes and the great use of shading, and the colors are so saturated. But also take a minute to ask the kids what they feel. What do you think? Is this a happy painting? Is this a sad painting? How does it make you feel? Peaceful. I love taking a minute to explore the emotion. They really enjoy taking a minute to explore the emotion of it. So we can go through the variety here. I'm just flipping through these really quick. But we've got, there are examples of everything. Here's one of his still lifes. You can kind of say, look how there is a lack of detail here. It's really simplified down to the basic shapes. You see the basic forms, the squares and triangles, and then it's covered up with this loosely painted foliage. But you don't see all of the little details in the windows and the doors. You don't see curtains. You don't even really, really, he's just used a few strokes to give you the impression of a window. That really is, what Impressionists were going for. And so you see that carry over in his Post-Impressionist work. Here's one of his portraits. And feel free, take a minute, talk about it. Like I say, there's more than you can really go through. But then I also wanted to throw in a few examples of Cubism, a couple of examples to show the students, because it really is fascinating how we went from this to this in a matter of several years. I mean, isn't that, sorry, you really can't fit this in the frame. Isn't that amazing? They're so different. It's so many hundreds of years to get to this change, and then, just a few decades, not even really in between someone like Marie Cassatt and Picasso. It's fantastic. And then with this, Cubism is interesting, and I think kids really respond well to it. But it's an art that's oh my goodness. It is too late. It's a movement that is a little bit harder to understand. It's not quite as aesthetically pleasing necessarily. But you can point out to them that the Cubists took it even farther. They were trying to show the different angles at the same time, the different angles that they saw at the same time. And even further than that, sometimes they've got different aspects of a whole story in one painting, and it's all just jumbled up together. And what does this make you feel? What do you think? What do you think about the loud colors? What are your impressions from this? It's fun. It's fun to have that conversation with them. But of course we can't have that conversation for too long because we want to give them time to paint. So you're going to pass out your small paper plates. And sorry, on the email I sent out, I thought we had gotten palettes at the beginning of the year, but that is for next year's budget. So we're just passing out paper plates. Just give them a small dollop of paint. I mean, really, honestly, just like squeeze out a little dot. Because initially, they're going to have a hard time kind of figuring out where they want to go. They're small canvases. The paint goes a long ways. But always, let them know they're welcome to have more. I want them to use the paint, but, we also don't want to be throwing away a ton of paint. So just say, I'm going to give you a small amount to start out with, and maybe give them like 3 or 4 colors to start out with, and then let them come to you. How I usually like to do it is I pass out the paper plates to everybody, and then I'll come around with 3 like basic main colors that we know everybody is going to want. Maybe like red, blue, green, whatever. And just give, say, do you want these? Do you want these? And then you maybe make a second round, or you just say, hey, come up and get, I have more colors, come up and get them. You're welcome to them. But I'm not going to pass around everything to everyone because 1, your plate doesn't have room for all of it. And then 2, you don't know if you're going to need that color. Just get what you think you're going to need, and you can always come get more. So let's see, you can be passing those out while the kids rough in. Also, let's take a minute to just remind them with their paintbrushes how we properly treat paintbrushes. We dip it in the water before we dip it in the paint. Paintbrushes are thirsty. That's what I like to tell the kids. They need a lot of water. We're painting fairly wet, and they can kind of decide, with this canvas, it can take a lot of water, the canvas board, so they can decide if they want to have a watery kind of watercolor feel to their painting, great. If they want it to be more thick and more solid, then great, go for it. Whatever you want, it's your painting. So we go over brush care tips really quick. I have a box of like still life props for you to set out for them. Go ahead and just set out. There are a few that kind of go together or whatever. Just, figure it out, set it out how you want on the tables, and then let the kids move around. If they want to do the apples, let them go move to the table where the apples are. If they want to do a vase with flowers, let them move to where the vase with flowers is. But really encourage them to do one of the still lifes that are set out rather than a Pokemon or a Minecraft picture for this reason. When you're looking at an actual solid object, you can see things about it that you won't see when you're coming up with something that's in your mind. And there's a place for both things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's not okay. But, you know, here I can see where the highlights are on this apple. I can see what the stem looks like coming out, what the shadow's like, what the shading is like underneath. I'm going to get a much more complete picture of this apple that I can then represent on my canvas than I can if I'm just thinking of an apple in my head. And I really want them to have that experience. Please encourage that. So, having said all of that, we're going to take a minute and just rough in. And I've started to rough in on this, and I'll just leave this on the art cart for you to show as an example. But then I'll also cut up some tag board that you can have on there and that you can use for an example if you want to go ahead and paint. But I'm very lightly putting in just the basics of what I want. There aren't any stems coming out of these apples. I'm not drawing in shading. And as you can see, it's really hard to see my lines because they're very light. And that way, my pencil isn't going to bleed through on my paint and show through in my final painting. So I'm just going to quickly and carefully, we're going to give this apple down off to the side. And there we are. I'm done. I'm ready to paint. It's just called a rough in because it's just rough and fast. And then also on this, I kind of wanted to encourage the kids to maybe take a slightly different view of the objects we have here. Maybe you're going to do something very up close. And we've got kind of an artichoke finial there. Maybe you're just going to do like the cool textures you see in that, and it's very close up. Or, you know, maybe you're going to center it and have it in the middle of your page. Maybe you're going to make it very small on the side and have a lot of negative space that's a cool color. All of those options are great options. Here I've done my bowl of apples, and look, I just have the corner of the bowl. You can see part of one apple, a teeny corner of another, and another part of an apple that's on the table next to it. I didn't draw a bowl in the center with the apples that fits just right in the page. I want to encourage them to kind of think outside the box a little with their composition. So definitely encourage that if you can. And then just remind them, you know, with the paint, go ahead and, you know, take brush strokes, lift up your brush in between. Don't scribble back and forth or press hard and wear out the bristles because we want to treat these well. And then go for it. Have fun. And please don't forget to wash the brushes at the end and leave them out for the next class to use. You guys are amazing. I love hearing back from the teachers, just hearing how much the kids have enjoyed art literacy this year, and that is because of you guys. I'm so thankful for it and so grateful for you. And we'll see you later. As always, please let me know if you have any questions or need anything at all. Thanks.